Hi, everyone. It's Wednesday after the first Sunday after the Epiphany, and it's time for another Wednesday Word. I recorded last week's video just about an hour or so before the unrest that broke out at the Capitol fundamentally changed the direction of this past week and possibly of the weeks and months that are going to follow. I mentioned and made some comments about that before worship this past Sunday. But I did want to take an opportunity today to talk about some of the rhetoric that's come out in the aftermath of what happened in Washington, D.C., particularly the calls for healing and unity and reconciliation that have been repeatedly made in the light of the Capitol riot. And I want to start talking about what it looks like to discuss unity and reconciliation by bringing things much closer to home and talking to you about an example of why this can be problematic from my own life. I've been here long enough, perhaps, for many of you to know that I am a very conflict-averse person. I do not like to be in arguments with other people, and it's generally sort of a compulsion of mine to try really hard when I have wronged somebody to make that right. That's certainly not a bad thing. But I've found over the years, particularly in my marriage, that this compulsion to try to get conflict taken care of and out of the way has sometimes been harmful. And what I mean by that is that I'm often so quick to jump to needing to apologize and to hear that word of forgiveness and to know that everything is okay, that I don't adequately take the time to think about how my words or actions have hurt the person that I'm in relationship with. And without doing that, my apologies and my drive for having that relationship repaired in the aftermath of that breach are not as authentic or genuine as they would otherwise be. It's taken me a long time to recognize that sometimes there needs to be space for me to understand what it is that I've done and to come with a genuine desire not only to make the relationship right, but to do so by changing something about my behavior or about my words that makes that offering of forgiveness actually take hold in my own life. As a pastor, I am generally in favor of concepts like unity and reconciliation and healing. These are things that we tend to offer as those aligned with the church. And yet, just as is the case in my own relationships, it's equally true that if we move and make those forceful calls for unity and reconciliation and healing before we've adequately dealt with the damage that's been done, all of those words and those concepts themselves ring hollow. I'm not arguing one way or the other about impeachment in my capacity as your pastor, nor am I arguing about any of the follow-on effects of that vote. What I am saying is that when we as a people try to make that move too quickly, we short-circuit the hard work of looking at ourselves. We short-circuit the work of actually being accountable to one another for the ways that our rhetoric and our actions affect one another and our community at large. I understand the impulse to want to move past the painful and terrible events of last Wednesday. And yet those events revealed a fundamental divide in the body politic that can't just be papered over by calls to reconciliation and unity. What I'm trying to suggest to you today is that we have work to do as the people of God in Christ and as citizens of this great nation. We have work to do as we come to terms with how things have gone so sideways. How misinformation and fear and anger and mistrust have so divided us that we can't even agree on what the facts are about really important things in our common life. And until we have those conversations, until we reckon with the depth of the divisions that exist within our country, within our communities, within our state, perhaps even within our congregation, we cannot make that move genuinely and authentically to healing, to unity, or to reconciliation. All of those things require both parties to have an honest acknowledgement of what has been broken so that we can find out what it would really mean to have relationships renewed and restored. This tendency in our political discourse, I think, comes from a misunderstanding of forgiveness within the church context as well. I've preached often about the idea that as people who have been forgiven, we need to be forgiving people. And yet, in the same way that the divisions within our society need to be reckoned with, the breaches within our individual relationships need to be reckoned with before forgiveness can actually have the impact that it's supposed to have. Forgiveness and healing and unity are empty words and empty concepts if they aren't accompanied by the deep, hard work of actually encountering one another as individuals, of recognizing the pain that we've inflicted upon one another by our action or by our inaction, and by committing to changing the way we're going to live together and talk about one another moving forward. Otherwise, our words are mere grass, and they will accomplish nothing lasting or fruitful in our common life. It's my hope that in these anxious and frightful days, that we would ask God for the courage to do that work, to encounter one another as people who care deeply about our country, about our relationships with one another, and about discerning together the path forward. I'm not talking about an easy unity that papers over differences, but a unity that takes seriously where we've been divided, where things have gone wrong, and where we need to go together to form a more perfect union. As always, my prayers continue for that. I hope that you will also include this work in your prayers, and that you'll start to do some of that work in your own relationships and within our community. As we do so, may the peace and guidance and wisdom of God, which surpasses all understanding, guard our hearts and our minds in Christ Jesus. Peace and good to all of you. I'll see you again next week.